Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast, brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Football Index and how I lost £50,000 on this gambling platform. So I got into Football Index quite early on. I got into it in February 2017. I was actually doing my A-levels at school, which is crazy. Like, I was literally 18 years old, studying theatre, economics, and what else was I doing? Maybe sociology. Yeah, I love sociology. And I'm at school and I put £10 in. I think I saw an ad on Facebook. Put £10 into this gambling platform where you buy and sell shares in virtual football players. And it was really exciting because I think I might have made like £1 or £2. And so I was like, oh, okay. You know, like 20% profit in like a few days. This isn't too bad. So maybe I put in another 10 quid. And then I remember actually, there was a day when I told my mum about Football Index and I said to her, hey mum, guess how much money I've put into Football Index? And she was like, go on, how much? And I said, £50 with a smile on my face. And she was like, no, you haven't. You've not put £50 in Football Index. And I was like, yeah, no, I have. and she couldn't quite believe it because to me, to be honest, like £50 when I was 18 was quite a bit of money. So I put 50 quid in and then ended up going off and doing a degree apprenticeship when I was 18 years old in leadership and business management, and started to earn a wage. I was studying for a degree at the same time, working 5 days a week and studying for this degree. And I started to put a bit more of that wage into the Football Index. Again, this is quite early on in the Football Index days, so I was one of the first people sort of on it. And, well, not one of the first, but, you know, probably first maybe 20,000 or so. So relatively new to it all. And I ended up turning about £1,000 into, I don't know, maybe like £3,000 or £4,000 quite quickly. And then things start to snowball and I'm really getting into this Football Index platform. I end up making about £10,000 in around 3 or 4 months or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, like what is going on here? Because I was making about £1,000 a month through my wage at work, but then I've just made like £3,000 or £4,000 a month via this like Football Index platform. And this Football Index platform, by the way, was honestly one of the most enjoyable things I've ever experienced, because what it is you're researching real life football players and you're buying shares in them based on their real life performances and their potential to earn dividends based on those real life performances in the future. And the share would last for 3 years. So it was like kind of investing in these players based on their potential. And so what I was doing is I was like scouting players across the whole of Europe, watching videos of players when they're like in the academies. So there was a player called Anthony Gordon who I had shares in when he was literally 16 at Everton Academy. And like I'd seen him score a goal like in the academy the night before and I'd buy like a load of shares in him. And then people would sort of see that in the market and start to buy him as well. And then you'd see his price go up on this sort of homepage of this Football Index platform. And then there was another player called Dejan Kulusevski, and I had him when he was at Atalanta and he was under 18s. And sometimes I would literally be like one of the first people buying shares in these random players, because you could see when they'd IPO and you could see like the lowest price that they were. And sometimes these players would be like literally 13p and you could buy like 500 shares at 13p. And then the next day they're at like 40p or something like that. So then you've just, you know, multiplied, you've just made a lot of money. Basically, you've made a lot of money in a very short period of time. And so this would be highly, highly addictive, incredibly enjoyable. You're making a lot of money, and then you've got this amazing community of guys as well, because there's thousands and thousands of guys on this Football Index platform. So everyone's sharing on Twitter and other social media platforms talking about the Football Index. And I set up a Facebook page, actually. I think it was called Football Index Club, it was called Football Index Value Players. And I used to post about players that I was scouting around Europe and other leagues in the world. And it was basically just a community for anyone to share players that they'd found and talk a bit about those players. Sometimes people would do what was called pumping a player, where they'd buy the share, they'd buy the player, and then they'd talk about how great this player was. Sort of artificially inflate that price temporarily by getting loads of people to buy them and then sell that share and then make a quick profit. So there's a lot of pumping going on, but it was quite a great community online on Facebook. And that community ended up getting to like, I don't know, maybe 3,500 people, so quite a lot of members, and I was the admin running it, and I really enjoyed doing that. And then I set up something called Football Index Club, where there was like a lot of analysis on the different players, and I had a few hundred people in the Football Index Club, and they paid me £10 a month. So I managed to get to a position where I was able to quit that degree apprenticeship because, on a side note, that degree apprenticeship was absolutely awful. It was run by a company called Kaplan Financial, and it was their first time running one in collaboration with Aston University, and the whole thing was a shambles. But I don't want to hate on them too much because I know it was just ran terribly, and maybe they've improved it, but like half the degree apprenticeships actually left. So I was like, yeah, I've got to get out of here as well, because it was a 4.5 year program, and I was like, I can't spend another 3 years of my life basically working in a call center, which is what it was. So managed to get out of that by just running this Football Index club, this like community platform, and also making quite a bit of money on the Football Index myself. Things really kind of escalated, and I started to make more and more money on this platform. Ended up actually getting a mortgage on a flat in Manchester when I was 19. So that's how I managed to get my studio flat. Is I could say to the bank that I was making like £4,000 a month, because I was sort of bringing £4,000 from Football Index into my bank account for a few months just to kind of take a bit of money out. So the bank were like, oh yeah, he's got a good stable wage. And so I managed to get a mortgage, and things were really, really going quite well. I ended up renting out the flat to a different degree apprentice actually. And so he lived in my flat for about a year. I moved out to Portugal in 2020. So I'd been on the platform for a few years by that point, built up this business, built up quite a bit of money in the platform myself, and I really, really preached a lot about this platform because I did see it as the future of gambling. I saw it as the future of football betting because it had so much potential. There was this massive community online. People were really, really invested in it, both with their money, but also mentally, like the enjoyment it gave people, like a massive community of men who, smart people. There's a lot of very, very clever people on Football Index, and people with all kinds of jobs, you know, people really, really high up at some big companies, they were getting into Football Index. And so you had like this community of guys who were kind of getting into data a lot. Like there was a lot of data, and I ended up actually collaborating with another platform called Football Index Edge, and that was run by this smart software engineer guy who had set up like these dashboards where you could analyze the players a lot more. And so we ended up building a business together as well. So it kind of combined my analysis and insights and knowledge on like stocks and shares, because I read like The Intelligent Investor, and I started to make a lot of notes and get into like stocks and shares and understanding how markets worked a bit better and the psychology behind all of that. So we built a business together, kind of collaborated, and yeah, things were like looking up and going really well. And then COVID hit. I think that was where things started to go a bit wrong, because football in real life got postponed, I think, a few weeks, and then the market started to drop a little bit. And then there was a few YouTube videos by somebody talking about how this market, the Football Index, was a bit of a scam, or like there was problems with this market and the actual overall structure of it. And then Football Index started to do more and more bonuses. In fact, one of the bonuses earlier on was one where I think you could invest £10,000 and get £1,000 just straight back into your account. So it was like 10% of all the money you put in, you get 10% back on it. So ended up like having one friend, for example, he had quite a bit of money somehow. And I said to him, look, just put £10,000 in and then take the £1,000 bonus and then just leave the platform. And he did that. And he was literally on the platform 2 days, made £1,000, like the easiest money he'd ever made. So I had some friends do really well, and then I had some other friends who did really badly. So anyway, COVID hits, things start to get a bit shaky. Some people start to take some money out. They start doing all these bonuses, and things are actually getting quite unsustainable because the amount of dividends that Football Index are paying out doesn't quite add up. Like they'd IPO'd players like Kylian Mbappe and all these amazing players at extremely low prices, like literally pennies, like very low. And then what had happened is they were still paying out these dividends, like in quite high quantities, on these players who had IPO'd at tiny amounts, and things just got more and more unsustainable. And actually Football Index ended up talking to me and a few other sort of guys who were really involved in the community, and they'd have these meetings and invited us, and I remember the names of actually a few of the guys at Football Index. And anyway, long story short, I can't really remember exactly what happened, but people started to take more and more money out. And that was like the first time that happened, because up until then, the market had only ever been going up and up and up. And I think the market as a whole got to about 100 million pounds in this market. And then the day happened when Football Index decided to drop their dividends. And it was actually in their terms and conditions, I think, that they could do this. And they reduced the amount of dividends that they were going to be paying out. And at that point, shit really hit the fan, because the market essentially crashed. And I went from having a portfolio of £50,000 to having something like maybe £25,000 in not a lot of time. And then things just got lower and lower. And things really, really just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And a lot of people were kind of on the fence, like, what do I do now? And the market just got destroyed very, very quickly. And yeah, altogether, I ended up losing like genuinely £50,000 on this platform. And it was a crazy experience, because, you know, I'd bought this flat, I'd moved to Portugal temporarily, built this business, helping people, or thinking I was helping people, not trying to quit, and that's what I'm doing now. Built this platform, trying to help people actually make more money. And for a while, a lot of those customers did make a lot of money, and they told me about that. But yeah, the market crashed, and it is really mad what happened, because the gambling authority, like the gambling commission, didn't look into this well enough. They'd looked into it a bit, they'd done a bit of analysis, but they hadn't actually prevented this whole thing from happening. Now, it wasn't regulated by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, because it was a gambling platform. So it was the Gambling Commission who really were responsible for ensuring that nothing like this ever happened, because as it turned out, the whole thing was essentially one big scam. It was never actually going to be sustainable. And so the founder, Adam Cole, and people like Mike Bowen, just went off and made a load of money. And I think the money ended up in Guernsey or somewhere, you know, where you could avoid tax. So then these guys who ran the company basically just went off, essentially took all this money and ran. They'd built this unsustainable platform where thousands and thousands of people who really, really enjoyed football, enjoyed data, enjoyed this whole community side of things, had got fully invested in this platform, had been told and sold a ton of promises. And that was probably the worst thing, is the amount of marketing and promises and bonuses and lies about the financial situation that Football Index were in. That's probably one of the worst things about all of this, is that they kept on perpetuating this idea that they were financially stable and that things were all going really well from their side, and that there was more to come and more to come, and that things were only ever going to get better. And they had this marketing that was like phenomenal. You know, they had football teams in the Premier League wearing shirts with Football Index on it. Like, they had Gillen Balaguer doing ads. They had John Motson doing ads. Like, it was incredible the amount of money they'd invested in marketing. And you'd see billboards of Premier League matches with Football Index all over it. But none of this was actually regulated correctly by the Gambling Commission. And the whole platform crashed with just Adam Cole and maybe a few other people at Football Index probably making quite a substantial amount of money, while hundreds of millions of pounds, well, at least £100 million was lost. All these people who had invested money into what they thought was a safe platform, which it wasn't. So anyway, I ended up losing 50 grand. Really, really not ideal. Not what you want. So then I was like, okay, damn, like, what do I do now? I was at a bit of a loss, because obviously it meant that both my business had gone and all the money that I had gone. I'd kind of advocated people putting money into this platform, so obviously I felt a tremendous amount of guilt around that as well. I thought it was safe. I thought it was all legitimate, and I'd just bought into the lies. And I think for me, looking back now, and it's only through working with Mary Paulus, who's an addiction recovery expert, that I realised that there probably was a lot of addiction going on when I was on this platform, because I was so hooked on making more and more money and always putting more and more money in. I didn't really evaluate the potential consequences of doing so. And I even had a lot of what we call junkie thinking going on, where I thought I was diversifying my portfolio really, really well because I had like a spread of different players across like all these different leagues and different ages and players who could win dividends in different games and all of that. But I hadn't actually diversified, if you take a step back, my funds as a whole. So other than having my mortgage on my flat, I really hadn't diversified at all because I didn't have any stocks and shares. I didn't have my money in any savings really. All I had was just this massive pot of money in one gambling platform. It was absolutely insane. And a lot of people had done the same because essentially the returns had been so good for such a consistent amount of time, for like a good few years, that people had got so hooked on this platform that they really did believe in it just going up and up and up. And I think that probably is partly due to how dopamine works. It is the molecule of more. We're always wanting more. We're never satiated by what we have in the present moment. And so we're always going to want to get more and more and more. And there's only really a few people who had actually taken their money out and ended up doing quite okay, really, with Football Index as a whole. And fair play to them, but that was not me. I was probably one of the biggest losers on the platform, to be honest, in terms of how much money I lost. And in a way, because it is not it's not like an equitable like platform. Like not everyone succeeded on this. Obviously, most people ended up losing most of their money. But yeah, some people would have done all right. But anyway, that's my story of losing 50 grand on Football Index. And I think the key takeaways for anyone listening to the Beyond Compulsion Academy's Help Us Here podcast is really that there can be a lot of junkie thinking going on across a range of addictions. Because for me, the junkie thinking was, I have diversified, this is a safe platform, I've always made money in the past, so I'm going to continue making money in the future. Everything's really safe because the dividends work out. So like I'd literally calculate the potential dividends from my players and see it as a really, really safe bet, putting my money into these players, because you could almost work out through analysis like how much money is this player going to bring in. So I thought I was betting in a very safe way, but I hadn't accounted for the fact that Football Index could potentially reduce the dividends. So I really messed up. And yeah, that's essentially it with compulsion, is that you can get really, really deep into a compulsion of any kind and often not even know you're in it. That's what happened to me. But overall, no regrets, to be honest, because that might sound crazy, but genuinely some of the best years of my life were using Football Index, connecting with the community, and yeah, it was fun, It was fun talking to great guys who were interested in football, like talking about football, building a community up around it. And I just feel really sad that it did end the way it did. So yeah, thanks for watching or listening to this podcast. I hope you can maybe take something away from it when it comes to quitting any compulsion of your own, and maybe just evaluate if there is any that you have that maybe you're not aware of right now. And if you do want any help or support in terms of overcoming any compulsion, then just go over to beyondcompulsionacademy.com. We have a compulsion test where you can take a free test and see if you're addicted to porn in particular, or get more help and advice from me and my mentor, Mary Portis. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Goodbye.